And so on and so on. And so on and so on. And so on and so on.
The critique of Eurocentrism is missing the fact that capitalism right now doesn't need the Eurocentric ideas. We don't need, right? It doesn't need equality and democracy anymore. The cultural values of Eurocentrism no longer apply.
And this is one of Zizek's refrains, is that the return to tradition, the return to culture, to multiculturalism, is a kind of conservative reaction, or rather like a kind of imminent reaction and dynamic of capitalism.
And even a specifically modern reaction to it too.
Yes, yeah. He says, so in modernism, traditional values, and I'm paraphrasing or quoting him directly, can be a justification for engagement in capitalism on ruthless ethical terms, right? Like I'm like, in my identity, I am free to engage in capital, and I think that's what you were alluding to in this sort of this modern application of tradition.
Yeah, maybe I'll read I have an extended quote here from Zizek from one of the videos you linked, Jake, in the Discord. It's really good. He says, global capitalism does not automatically push subjects towards hedonist permissive individualism. And the fact that many countries would enter the road of rapid capitalization like India, many individuals stick to the so-called pre-modern ethics, family values, rejection of hedonism, strong ethnic identification. This in no way proves that they are not fully modern. It's not that, as some people say, we in the West are properly modern, while in India they are backward and they still need traditional values. This sticking to traditional values is precisely what allows countries like China and Singapore to follow the path of capital more effectively than Western liberal countries. References to traditional values are used by individuals to justify their ruthless engagement in market competition in ethical terms.
Right. Or even antagonisms. The antagonisms can be smoothed over or absorbed by the
in the cultural sphere. I think the cultural sphere is best at kind of naturalizing those distinctions, right? And Zizek has mentioned this before, like in India, when the British were really starting to dominate there, they actually disseminated one of the more or less kind of forgotten texts of Hinduism, which became the kind of main justification for the modern still persisting caste system. And what that does, quite literally, is divide people up into, ostensibly classes, and naturalizes them. You were born into a particular caste, and that's that's your proper place in the social and economic order.
Right.
And it's this. So an example like this is what we're driving at here. I think that the traditional values are not opposed necessarily to the functioning of capital.
No, and if anything, they justify it.
Exactly, and I think maybe this is where we can jump into Zizek's redefinition of Eurocentrism.
Well, just before we do that, I think it's important to sort of pause and say, Zizek is not arguing for nationalism. I think Eurocentrism is often understood, or is traditionally understood, as a privileging of the West over the global South, right? And that's like, this is not what Zizek is arguing for. I want to say obviously, but this is what we're really talking about, is that it's not about nationalism. It's about finding in Eurocentrism what is universal. And so this is the irony,
it's not
right?
Europe as a place.
Because it's in Europe that we initially conceive of the notion of universalism as a political movement.
Well,
but also as a philosophical determined subject, right?
Yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah, but I mean, in terms of understanding universalism as it like involves countries in relation to one another, it's a political exercise.
Right. Universalism should be definitely understood in contrast to globalism, right? It's and that's the Eurocentric concept is universalism over globalization. And this is why it's important to that Zizek isn't just saying we privileging European thought. It's just that out of European out of the European tradition, we get concepts that are universal that actually get used in, historically speaking, in some ways that are beyond Europe, right? So he cites the Haitian Revolution quite frequently, right? And this is, and like the other thing we obviously want to touch on the cogito, but that historical materialism is a Eurocentric concept, and so like for him, it's not just understanding the universal subject, but it's like we also, out of the Eurocentric tradition, we get a form of criticism that is fundamentally anti-capitalistic, right? We like historical materialism, and so Marxism is not Eurocentric, but it is a concept that comes out of the Eurocentric tradition.
Right.
Exactly, and I think that's the crucial difference, right, between like understanding the difference between placing ideas like in specific countries and thinking that they belong to those countries and that they can't be kind of exported, and they can't involve subjects from different parts of the world, because that logic actually kind of relies on thinking that there's kind of like incongruent or impossibility of communication between cultures. And that standpoint, the multicultural standpoint, the identitarian standpoint, actually completely forecloses any notion of universality.
That we couldn't possibly understand one another in our various essentialized identities. But Zizek says in that video that I put in the Discord, we should not fetishize truth as such. And I loved that. Like, it's sort of like
fantastic.
I thought that it was fantastic, and like I know that sounds sort of maybe vague or too open-ended, but like when I was listening to it last night, it's like, oh man, like we actually take our identities as like this sort of irreducible, and I would say fetishized truth of the matter, truth of the like, and then my truth means that you can't possibly, I couldn't understand yours and you can't understand mine. But his emphasis on concepts that are universal is about like there are ways, despite our disparities, that we can understand one another, and
or that not even mere understanding, but that our struggles themselves are universal.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And so on and so on. And so on and so on. And so on and so on.